What if I told you the final scene of Perry Mason, one of the most iconic shows in TV history, wasn't just scripted drama, but a real-life betrayal caught on camera? The star, Raymond Burr, gave everything to that role, but what CBS did to him shocked even the cast. And wait until you hear who made a silent appearance in the very last shot. Stay with me, because what really happened behind the scenes will change how you see the show forever. It was never meant to be a goodbye. That final episode of Perry Mason was supposed to be just another chapter, but hidden in the closing moments was a betrayal so silent, it left even the cast reeling. They were mid-shoot when the word came down. The show was over. No warning, no farewell, not even a phone call. Just like that, 9 years of television history evaporated. The heartbreak was real. Tears weren't scripted. They flowed when the cameras rolled one last time. And in a twist fit for fiction, the man who had birthed Perry Mason, Erle Stanley Gardner, appeared on set, stepping into the courtroom he had imagined so many times. But this time, he wasn't writing the verdict, he was living it. Gardner had never truly trusted Hollywood, not after watching his creation get distorted by studios chasing easy drama. The 1930s film versions missed the essence. The radio show twisted Perry's intellect into something cheap. Disappointed and angry, Gardner pulled his character from the airwaves and swore, "Never again," unless he was the one calling the shots. And then came Gail Patrick. She wasn't just another Hollywood executive trying to cash in. She had a law background, a career in front of the camera, and, most importantly, a connection to Gardner through her husband, his literary agent. Slowly and carefully, she earned Gardner's trust, not with charm, but with respect. She listened, and eventually she became the bridge between Perry Mason, the character, and Perry Mason, the phenomenon. That trust led to the formation of Paisano Productions, with Patrick as president, a groundbreaking role for a woman in 1950s television. CBS wanted something flashy and live, full of melodrama, but Patrick stood firm. She knew live television wouldn't do justice to Perry's sharp, methodical courtroom style. CBS pushed forward with their own idea, birthing The Edge of Night, a show that shared little more than a courtroom backdrop. Meanwhile, Patrick fought for filmed episodes, pre-recorded like I Love Lucy, to maintain precision. She was right. That decision gave Perry Mason a polished, timeless edge that changed legal dramas forever. In 1956, they bet everything. Paisano Productions paid $100,000 out of pocket to shoot a pilot, The Case of the Moth-Eaten Mink. Gardner was floored. He wrote to Patrick in disbelief. For the first time, someone had captured his vision, but they still needed the right face for Mason. The search was brutal. Fred MacMurray, William Holden, even Richard Carlson were considered. None felt quite right. The issue? Gardner had never described Mason's appearance in his books. The role was about presence, not looks. Then came Raymond Burr. He didn't even audition for Mason. He came in hoping to play the district attorney, Hamilton Berger, but every time he read opposite someone trying out for Mason, he stole the scene. There was something undeniable about him. Commanding, intelligent, unreadable. The producers couldn't ignore it. And when Gardner watched Burr's screen test, he didn't hesitate. He pointed at the screen and shouted, "That's Perry Mason!" In that instant, a decade of disappointment turned to triumph. Burr had brought the character to life in a way no one else could. The casting magic didn't stop there. Barbara Hale stepped into the role of Della Street, Perry's indispensable secretary. William Hopper, who'd tried out for Mason, became private investigator Paul Drake. William Talman won the role Burr had originally wanted. Hamilton Berger, the courtroom adversary who never quite cracked Mason's armor. And Ray Collins joined as Lieutenant Tragg, the skeptical cop who added just the right edge of realism. The chemistry was electric. When the series premiered in 1957, viewers didn't just tune in, they connected instantly. But the transformation didn't stop at casting. Burr had been typecast as a villain in film noir. Gail Patrick told him bluntly, if he wanted to be Mason, he had to look the part. Burr took it seriously. In 1 month, he shed nearly 100 pounds. He reshaped himself, both physically and professionally. And though the weight crept back over time, Burr's dedication never wavered. Long filming hours became his rhythm. The pressure was relentless, yet behind the scenes, he fought to maintain the image that viewers had come to believe in. What made Perry Mason stand out wasn't just the actors or the drama, it was the obsessive commitment to legal accuracy. Producer Ben Brady and story editor Gene Wang both had law degrees. They dissected every script to ensure courtroom scenes felt authentic. Gail Patrick brought her legal training into every creative decision, from wardrobe to dialogue cadence. Together, they built something more than a TV show. It was a televised law firm in disguise. Actors weren't just hired for charisma. They had to look and sound like real lawyers. This wasn't about style, it was about substance. And Gardner? He remained hands-on throughout all 271 episodes. He didn't just license his character. He negotiated a rare deal giving him 60% ownership. Every script was sent to him for notes. Detailed, merciless notes. Writers dreaded his edits, but respected the care he poured into every scene. He even created a Perry Mason Bible, a guide that dictated how Mason should speak, think, and carry himself. CBS agreed to everything. They knew the real magic came from Gardner's vision. When the case of the moth-eaten mink finally aired, it didn't look like anything else on TV. The lighting was noir-heavy, the mood thick with mystery. Gangsters haunted the shadows. Hidden notes lay beneath tables. There was even a tense shootout in Perry's office. Burr's Mason wore a detective's hat, looked leaner, and felt tougher, more rogue than refined. As the series continued, those rough edges smoothed. The visual style became more polished, the tone more structured. But the core remained: sharp minds, moral battles, and a deep belief in justice. When Perry Mason first arrived on screens in 1957, no one could have predicted it would become a cultural landmark. Yet it didn't just win over viewers. It rewrote the rules for what a legal drama could be. And somewhere in that quiet, final episode, buried beneath the betrayal and the tears, was a truth even more powerful. Perry Mason never left the courtroom. He became it. It didn't take long for Perry Mason to become more than just a show. It became the backbone of Saturday night. By its third season, it had bulldozed its way into America's top 10, captivating over 15 million households week after week. CBS, sensing the magnetic pull of the courtroom drama, made a risky move in 1962. They shifted it to Thursdays. Most shows would have stumbled under the weight of that pressure. But Perry Mason didn't just hold steady, it soared. By season 8, it was still riding high in the ratings, a nearly impossible feat in an industry that chews up even the best by season 4. And behind that sustained success, one unshakable force: Raymond Burr. Burr wasn't just playing a character, he was Perry Mason. Nearly every scene revolved around him. And the audience? They noticed. He snagged 2 Emmys for Best Lead Actor, while Barbara Hale as Loyal Della Street earned one of her own. Even more telling were the TV Guide Awards, based entirely on fan votes. That kind of devotion doesn't happen by accident. Something about Burr's quiet intensity, his unwavering defense of the innocent, it hit people in the heart. And then came a recognition unlike any other. The American Bar Association gave Perry Mason their very first Silver Gavel Award. A television show honored for upholding legal integrity? That's not just impressive, it's unprecedented, and it speaks volumes about how deeply the show resonated, not just as entertainment, but as a reflection of justice itself. For 5 glorious years, starting in 1957, Saturday nights at 7:30 weren't just prime time. They were sacred. Families would time their dinners around it. Kids finished homework early. Even teachers worked references into classroom chatter. When an episode didn't air, CBS's switchboards lit up. Once, a group of nuns from St. Theodore's actually called to complain. That's how deep the connection went. Viewers weren't just watching Perry solve a case. They were part of something dependable, something comforting. The music would swell, the courtroom would quiet, and people leaned in, hearts pounding. So when something shocking happened in 1963, it shattered everything fans thought they knew. Perry Mason lost. It was in The Case of the Deadly Verdict. Janice Barton, his client, was convicted and sentenced. The perfect record, gone. Audiences were stunned. Was this really happening? The loss wasn't just a plot twist. It felt personal. But Perry didn't give up. He dug deeper, and the truth unraveled. Janice had lied, and someone had rigged the medication to frame her. The episode was so intense, so destabilizing, that CBS pulled it from reruns for more than 20 years. And when it finally aired again in 1988, it had become legendary. CBS wasn't afraid to experiment. In 1966, one episode, The Case of the Twice-Told Twist, aired in color. Just once, gone was the cozy noir palette. Suddenly Burr's steely blue eyes were visible, and the courtroom had a glossy, surreal sheen. But not everyone liked the change. Some thought the red-tinted wounds looked like melted wax. Others said it felt like watching a stage play rather than a gritty legal drama. And so, despite the burst of color, it remained the only episode in the series filmed that way. A bold leap that never quite landed. But boldness wasn't new for Perry Mason. Long before diversity became a buzzword, the show made quiet, significant moves. In 1959, The Case of the Blushing Pearls broke ground by centering its plot around Japanese-American characters. Actress Nobu McCarthy gave a deeply human performance. A young George Takei, years before becoming Mr. Sulu, made an early appearance. The episode was set in Little Tokyo, featured Japanese music, and treated its characters with rare respect. Even more quietly revolutionary, Bill Walker, a black actor, had a speaking role, a first for the series. And then came The Curious Case of 1963. In The Case of the Skeleton's Closet, the show featured a black judge, Vince Townsend Jr., a real-life trailblazer in law. It should have been a milestone, but instead, the judge was given no lines, not even one, and because the writers refused to script any dialogue for him, the courtroom scenes played out with zero objections or responses. The silence was deafening. Audiences noticed. The press noticed. It felt like the show wanted credit for progress without doing the heavy lifting. A missed opportunity that left a hollow echo, yet no off-screen drama compared to what happened in March 1960. William Tallman, who played Hamilton Burger, Perry's courtroom rival, was caught in the crosshairs of a scandal that nearly ended his career. That night, police raided a West Hollywood apartment under murky circumstances. Rumors flew, allegations of indecency and wild behavior. The press latched on instantly. It didn't matter that the facts were fuzzy. The damage was done. Just 4 days later, CBS cut Tallman loose. No warning, no public defense. His name was pulled from the credits, his presence wiped from the show's DNA. But justice, ironically, was on Tallman's side. By June, a judge tossed the entire case. There wasn't enough evidence. The arrest had been flawed from the start, but CBS, they stayed quiet. They were already hunting for a replacement. For 9 long months, fans were left wondering. Hamilton Burger had vanished. And here's where the story twists again. Because Tallman wasn't left to fight alone. His castmates didn't just shrug and move on. They stood by him, quietly, fiercely. In an era when public scandals meant immediate exile, that loyalty was extraordinary. It wasn't just a show about defending the innocent. It was a show where, behind the scenes, the cast lived those values. Even after its final episode aired in 1966, the echoes of Perry Mason didn't fade. Fans had grown up with it. And when the TV movies returned in the 1980s, those same fans tuned in again. Older, wiser, but still loyal. Because for them, Perry Mason wasn't just a TV lawyer. He was a symbol of justice, of order, of a time when the good guy really did win. Raymond Burr stared at the trade paper in disbelief. No call, no meeting, no warning. Just a headline announcing the end of Perry Mason. After nearly a decade, over 270 episodes, and an unrelenting production schedule that consumed his every waking moment, it was over. Not with a grand farewell, but with silence. For someone who had given so much, it felt like betrayal. He had been persuaded to stay for one final season, lured with promises of color TV, fan loyalty, and studio reverence. But CBS had already moved on, and the news hit like a gut punch. It wasn't just Burr who was blindsided. Barbara Hale and William Hopper, castmates from the very beginning, were just as stunned. The timing made it worse. They were still filming the final episode when the cancellation news broke. That last episode, The Case of the Final Fade-Out, turned into a surreal goodbye. The entire crew was invited to appear on screen. Even the original author, Erle Stanley Gardner, stepped into the courtroom as a judge, his only on-screen role ever. The air was thick with melancholy. It wasn't just a show ending, it was a world dissolving. 9 years of long days, sleepless nights, and relentless work schedules collapsed into one emotionally charged week. Burr, who often memorized scripts at 3 a.m. and was still learning lines at 9 a.m. before filming began, had endured it all. But CBS's silence made that sacrifice feel hollow. But maybe, in some way, Burr knew the end had been coming. The network had made a questionable choice the year before, moving Perry Mason from its reliable Thursday night slot to go head-to-head with Bonanza, then America's top-rated show. It was a suicidal ratings gamble. Back in the 50s, Perry Mason could hold its own. But by the mid-60s, Bonanza was an unstoppable cultural force. Within a year, Mason had slipped out of the top 40. The writing was on the wall. What's haunting is that the show's end wasn't just business. It was personal. For Burr, who once joked he didn't have a life outside of the courtroom set, this wasn't just a role. It was his identity. He had lost weight, changed his lifestyle, and pushed himself past exhaustion to keep the show alive. His loyalty was never in question. CBS had convinced him to do the final season, shot entirely in color for the first time. It was supposed to be a bold new chapter, but just 3 weeks after he agreed, the axe came down. Still, Burr wasn't the only one carrying invisible scars. William Tallman, the man who played the ever-defeated prosecutor Hamilton Berger, had his own redemption arc. After being suddenly fired over an offset scandal, he faced public humiliation. But what happened next was almost unheard of in Hollywood. Burr, producer Gail Patrick Jackson, and even the usually quiet Gardner all rallied behind Tallman. Fans flooded CBS with protest letters. TV critics called out the network for its harshness. And 9 months later, in a move as quiet as the firing, CBS let him return. No fanfare, no statement, just back to business. Tallman returned with grace. Never bitter, never vengeful. He went on to film over 200 episodes, maintaining a humility rare in an industry obsessed with image. Once, he even said that Berger wasn't really a loser, because in a just system, not convicting an innocent person was actually a victory. It was a quiet, profound way to see things. Tallman didn't just act with integrity, he lived it. While Tallman was reclaiming his place, Ray Collins, who played Lieutenant Tragg, was slowly fading from view. His health was deteriorating, his ability to work slipping through his fingers. Smoking had left him breathless, and the effort to memorize lines was becoming too much. Producers knew it was time. Wesley Lau stepped in as Lieutenant Anderson, and Collins, though still respected, quietly took his final bow in 1964. But even then, he was treated with dignity. The team never let him disappear into obscurity. Through it all, Burr remained the center of gravity, but his personal sacrifices weren't widely known. He had built a quiet empire behind the scenes. At the height of his success, Burr owned a fleet of luxury vehicles: Cadillacs, Mercedes-Benz, and even a custom-built Rolls-Royce. He sported a collection of rare Patek Philippe and Rolex watches, each one a symbol of his hard-earned success. His real estate portfolio included a massive estate in Sonoma County, a secluded Hawaiian retreat, and a sprawling vineyard property. Though he kept a low profile, Burr also owned a private jet for frequent travel, often used to visit his charitable projects. He invested wisely in vineyards, a rare orchid nursery, and even co-founded a publishing company. His business instincts were sharp, and he reportedly had comprehensive insurance coverage for health, property, and even work delays, a testament to how meticulously he protected both his wealth and his future. From his habits, fans could glean one powerful financial lesson: always diversify, protect your time, and invest in what brings long-term value, not just glamour. As the final scenes of Perry Mason wrapped on April 19, 1966, there was no grand celebration, just quiet reflection. Don Anderson, who had made over 120 appearances in small background roles, was there like always. For him and many others, the show wasn't just a job. It was a rhythm of life, a place where days blurred together, but friendships formed and careers blossomed. And in that final week, as the cameras rolled one last time, it wasn't just a show ending. It was an era closing its doors. For nearly a decade, Perry Mason had given audiences a hero who always found the truth. But behind the camera, the real truths, the loyalty, the exhaustion, the heartbreak, and the resilience were far more compelling. And maybe that's why, all these years later, the story still lingers. Because it wasn't just about winning cases. It was about what it cost to keep going when the verdict is always uncertain.